Good afternoon from IIT Gandhinagar, where we are having today the second part of Professor V.N.Prabhakar's talks on Indian architecture. Yesterday, he took us through a dazzling journey through the rock-cut structures of India, which are unfortunately still very poorly known, and explained the principles and the concepts behind them and all the different physical features. Today, we are moving to constructed structures, structural temples, and we will discover again the richness of India's architectural heritage, which Professor Prabhakar is well qualified to tell us about in view of his considerable experience as a professional archaeologist. In fact, he recently joined IIT Gandhinagar, retiring from Archaeological Survey of India as Director of Excavations and Explorations. I will not repeat his entire profile, which is available on our website, iks.iitgn.ac.in, where everyone can find video recordings of past years, to which he had actually occasionally contributed also, and also all the speakers for this current course on the Indian Web of Aesthetics and Arts. So over to you, Professor Prabhakar. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation again, and we will be listening to you.
Thank you once again for inviting me to give a talk. So yesterday we saw the various manifestations of rocket architecture, its beginnings, and also its culmination, and the various artistic expressions what the ancient craftsmen they have used the rock surface to exhibit. Today we will be looking into the structural aspects of the temples. I would say that they existed along with the rocket structures. It is not that they were one type of architecture is earlier and another is later. It wasn't like that. If we look into the archaeological evidences also, we do find structural temples along with the rocket structures also. And again, if I would like to recall the inscription of Mahendravarman, which we saw yesterday, of the Mandakapattu inscription, he mentions about this brickless, timberless, mortarless, metalless temple he is constructing. It definitely indicates that there were temples before that time period which were constructed using brick, timber, mortar, that is using the various types of lime mortars or other materials, and also metal. So that is the kind of evidence which we find, and also even from the very earliest context, also we might find some indicative evidences. We don't have the actual tangible evidence from the Harappan civilization. Today I will start from the Harappan civilization because we have indications of a kind of religion which existed during the Harappan civilization, but we don't have tangible structural remains that to indicate a particular type of temple existed there or not. So I will share my presentation now so that you can appreciate well looking into the various images. So this is my outline of that presentation. Today we'll start with some of the evidences from the Harappan civilization. Indicative evidence, as I told you, it's not the tangible evidence, so it has to be taken with a caution. We cannot claim that a particular religion existed there, or indicating some temples existed. There could be. Then we will move on to some of the earliest examples of structural temples which we find from the Indian context. Then the temple forms and shapes. What are the various forms and shapes? What are the classifications the archaeologists and the architectural historians they use to classify the temples to understand them in a better manner? Under this classification, we have broadly the Nagara and the Dravida style of temples. We will look into that briefly, and some of the examples and some of the styles outside India, how the Indian architectural style along with the religion which influenced structural temples outside India. We will be briefly looking into that also. So with starting from the Harappan context, we have certain evidences indicating a mode of worship, maybe a divinity existing there, or some sacrifices happening. Like in the case of two important seals, both are from Mohenjo-daro. This is considered to be one of the most famous yogic seal. It has been given a name of Proto-Shiva by Sir John Marshall. Here a deity with a horned headgear is shown seated in a yogic posture with three faces. You can see three faces are shown here, and along with a host of animals. So that's why Sir John Marshall, he was induced to term is at a Proto-Shiva. And one more seal from Mohenjo-daro, it has a deity again with a horned headgear. Somehow this horned headgear is very interesting from the Harappan context. We see some of the elites maybe, and particularly these this type of depictions, it always accompany the person with a horned headgear. Here a deity is shown inside a people tree. You can see the people leaves here. So it's a personification of a people tree. Even today, if we go to the villages, or even in cities and towns, the people tree is venerated and worshipped. And the standing deity is here in front of the deity. It's a kneeled figure, and with a raised hands, and again with a horned headgear. And there is a composite human-animal composite figure standing beside that figure. So these are all some indicative evidences that there could be some sort of a ritual performed before a deity. And interestingly, this is a complete linga with a yonipita from the site of Kalibanga. So of course we can associate it with to an early form of as worship that may be identified with the early form of Saivism. Who knows? But we don't have nothing more to indicate to any particular religion. But interestingly, if you look into this seal, it has parallels in Dholavira. This is from Mohenjo-daro, and this is from Dholavira, nearly 500 kilometers from Mohenjo-daro. But the same scene is depicted here. You can see the deity, but in a crude fashion, of course. But the deity is standing here, and the kneeled figure here with the animal here. So this is how we can trace the ideological transmission from one side to another also. And interestingly, these sort of freestanding objects. This is a complete pillar with an indication of a phallic object here, and again some omphalos or the navel stones from Harappa, which also indicate maybe upper portion of a linga. So this is an indication of some sort of ritualistic worship is going on. And what about the temples? Do we have any evidence of temples from the Harappan context? No, we don't have from the excavations. Even though Dr. Bisht, he in his report writes about an upsidal temple from the site of Banavali, which is a Harappan temple. But apart from that, the structural remains, we don't have any other tangible evidences from that structural remains. So it may be a temple, may not be a temple. But there are indications from, again, these kind of narrative seals. If you see the narrative seal here, again, it's a deity with a horned headgear seated in yogic posture. Some of this yogic posture and this horned headgear, it accompanies some sort of a divinity. And here the deity is shown inside an enclosure. You can see this is a big enclosure. The deity is seated inside, maybe a temple. And here again, the deity is seated beside a structure here. So it may be a part of a huge structure in which in one chamber the deity is seated. So this is again indicating some sort of a structural remain that could have been in use. And also we see some supernatural scenes from the narrative tablets from Harappa. Again, we can see the famous human holding two animals very closely resembling the Sumerian and the Mesopotamian concepts here. But also here you can see again a seated yogic posture with horned headgear, and a sacrifice is performed in front of him or her. So this is the kind of indications which we can clearly correlate to some sort of a religious establishment or a ritualistic structure within the Harappan overall Harappan civilization, accompanied by certainly some sort of a structure also. But the exact form and shape we don't know. Along with this, we have certain ideological features in the form of this horned headgear motif, which appears in the Cordilleran levels around 4th millennium BCE and the end of the 4th millennium, beginning of 3rd millennium BCE, and which is found far and wide. It's not only restricted to the Sindh area. Kordiji is in Sindh area, Rehmanderi is in western Pakistan, Burzahom is Kashmir, Banawali is Haryana, and Kalibanga is Rajasthan. It's a huge area. The same sort of horned headgear motif we are seeing everywhere. So it's a clear indication of some ideological feature and a common belief system. And again, if we come to the people leaf motif, it is much earlier. It goes back to the 5th millennium BCE, and it is found across many different regional Chalcolithic cultures, be it in the Balochistan region, upland Balochistan, or the Makran coast area, or in the Mundigak in the Afghanistan area, Mehergarh in the lower Balochistan area, or even to the present day context. You can see the worship of people tree in the present day context also. So nature worship would have been the earliest in the case of Harappa, and slowly Harappan Civilization, slowly it materialized into various forms of belief systems and religious establishments. So with this background, we move to the early historical context, during which we find the first evidence of a structural temple, even though it is incomplete. But here there is an inscriptional evidence. There is an inscriptional evidence which is famously known as the Khan Baba. This is the pillar near Vidisha. It is known as Base Nagar, where a person known as Heliodorus, an ambassador of Antiochus, is Indo-Greek king in the 2nd century BC. He visited this place. He visited the local ruler known as Bhagabhadra, and he kind of acted as an ambassador from the Indo-Greek king, and he caused this pillar to be erected. It is known as a Garuda pillar. The Garuda is missing at the top, but it is known as the Garuda pillar. He names himself as the Garuda pillar, and excavation carried out adjacent to this pillar has brought to light an apsidal structure. You can see the apsidal plan here. It's an apsidal structure which was found very close to this Garuda pillar, and again it's a clear indication of the temple of Vasudeva, because the inscription mentions about the temple of Vasudeva, and so this is the earliest tangible evidence, one can say. Along with this, what we are finding is that contemporary rulers, contemporary dynasties like the Kushanas, they depict various deities. I mean, they depict a series of deities like Greek deities, Persian, Sumerian, Elamite, and the Indian deities. Most of the Indian deities we can see like Shiva. You can see Shiva in various forms. He is depicted here prominently with the trident and also three-faced here, and also Buddha. Buddha is is written here as Bodho. So this is the kind of evidences. Definitely, we see the amalgamation of various religious belief systems during this particular period of time, and everything was coexisting. And definitely, there would have been some temple remains also. Yet we don't have a tangible evidence. But these are all very clear indications. But starting from the 3rd century, end of 3rd century and beginning of 4th century CE onwards, we start to get structural remains along with the rocket structures. These are the rocket structures at Udaygiri, which also preserves the transformation from the rocket architecture into the structural temple format. So this is from Udaygiri. It's a cave number 2, if I am right. Here, what we see is that we see the pillars on the front facade here. It is a pilaster actually, along with a door jamb, but there are additional pillars in front of the shrine, so making it as a mandapa or a mukha mandapa in the architectural forms. So they are coming out, they are emerging out of the rocket architecture. They are not completely into the rocket architecture. They are coming out and started to construct the fully structural forms, like in the case of Sanchi. This is a famous temple number 17 at Sanchi, which consists of a Sandara type of shrine. Sandara is without circumambulation, and Nirandara is a shrine with circumambulation. And Sarvatobhadra is a temple that can be approached from all the 4 directions. We have seen Sarvatobhadra yesterday also in the context of Jaina faith, where the depiction of 4 Jaina Tirthankaras were depicted, and they can be approached from all different directions. So in the case of Sanchi, it consists of a very simple plain outer walls, and there is a small shrine here with a front mandapa or a mukha mandapa with some arrangement of pillars in front. So this is the Sanchi example. This is the elevation and plan. You can see a simple shrine. We don't know to which faith this temple was dedicated to. Most probably it was for the Buddhist faith because of the entire Buddhist establishment there. But what we are seeing is the most interesting feature here is the arrangement of the pillars. This is known as inter-columniation. The central width of this pillar is twice the width of these two adjoining pillars. So this is the formula what they have adopted, and it is quite the same even if you go to Udaygiri caves or the Nachna Kutara caves or other early forms, Nachna Kutara temple, sorry, or other temple forms of the early Gupta rulers. Will find the same sort of arrangement of intercolumniation. And this is another example of Sandara type of shrine, again of the Gupta period, but it is a brick built temple. So again, this is the possibility. Many brick temples might have been there. It could have collapsed or it could have decayed, and we are unable to get the actual remains. But there are temples which are coming out from the excavation, like the Banaras Hindu University. They excavated a site Akhta near Banaras, where also a Gupta period temple was brought to light. So we can clearly understand the kind of evolution, how it could have happened here. It is slightly later than the Sanchi example. It belongs to the 5th century CE, and already you can see the evolution of the Shikara here. So here, that's how we see the evolutionary patterns also, and we are seeing the adoption of the arches, the Chaitya arches, what we see in the rocket architecture. Even though again it is a copy from the wooden architecture, again it is reproduced here on the facades also. So here in the case of K1 Udaygiri case, we have one of the earliest example of a Nirandara type of a shrine. That is it's Nirandara is a circumambulation with circumambulation. So you can see a shrine here with 4 corner pillars, and there is a circumambulation. You can see one can go around the pedestal, and so that is how this is one of the earliest example. But typically there is an intercolumniation here also. The central width is twice the width of this adjoining pillar. So this is the pattern everywhere in a Gupta period temple, and even at the Tigawa temple of a Gupta period also this same principle can be seen. So sorry, this is the Dasavatara temple. I have wrongly written this temple number 17. This is the Dasavatara temple at Devgarh, which is the earliest, one of the earliest examples of the Sarvato Bhadra type of shrine. Here you can see from the plan, it can be approached from all the 4 directions. So even though the front the shrine is facing the eastern direction, it can be approached from all the 4 directions, and it has a circumambulation around this central shrine. And it has some of the earliest depictions of some of the Dashavatara panels from the Ramayana, and it is considered to be one of the excellent examples of the structural styles of the Gupta period. So with these earliest forms which are trying to take form in the Indian context, architectural context, we'll be looking into the various classifications and how they were trying to kind of actually incorporate the human aspect, the various human body parts, both in the horizontal as well as the vertical profile of a temple. So they have identified the various parts of the temple with the human body, like the head of the human body corresponds to the shrine. That is the main aspect of the temple, which houses the Lord, who houses the God, and which is the central place of worship. And the Gopuram, or the entrance gateway, corresponds to the foot. So this is the kind of symbolism which they have adopted, and similarly they have translated it to the vertical portion of the temple, and they have named each and every portion also corresponding to that also. So this is what even in the case of South Indian temples, like this is a Dravida Shikara and this is a North Indian style. Everywhere they have the same sort of adaptations, and ultimately they have tried to personify the human form within a temple on a horizontal as well as a vertical format. So broadly, the temples in India, they are classified into Nagara and the Dravida style. And this is the very broad classification. Again, there are many regional variations. The Dravida style, it is mostly found in the east, west, and the north India. In the North Indian context, we don't have much of the evidences left in the Gangetic plains, but we have excellent evidences available in the Uttarakhand region, even the Jammu Kashmir, in the Himachal Pradesh regions, where they are not at all affected due to invasion. We see here the Shikara as the superstructure. This curvilinear. This is the gentle curve which we see in the Shikara. That is the most characteristic feature of a Nagara style of a temple, which curves smoothly from the base to the top, and which also resembles a mountain. And it is always topped by an amlaka. Amlaka is a gooseberry. It's a fruit which is having very highly medicinal values, and ultimately they have found it suitable, the form to be suitable to place it here at the top. Invariably, each and every Nagara style of a temple, it has an amlaka. Depending upon the size of the temple, it may be small or bigger, and crowned by a stupi or a shikara. That is the ultimate crowning aspect, and flags or important motifs are depicted on this stupi also. So in contrast, what we find in a Dravida temple style, so it is mostly found in the southern Indian context. Even in Maharashtra, we have seen yesterday how it has reached Ellora, depending upon the various contexts with the southern kingdoms. Here the Vimana, the Shikara is known as Vimana, that is the superstructure. Vimana is pyramidal in form, and which also resembles a mountain. Same in the case of Nagara, even in the case of the Dravida style, they are culminating, they are reaching to the top as though we are reaching to the skies and the heavens, and reaching to the God in a symbolical manner. But here they also resemble a mountain, but the individual stories, they are clearly delineated. Here in the case of a Dharmaraja Ratha at Mahabalipuram, you can see it is a three-storied shrine, clearly delineated, and it has features named as Kuta, Shala, and Panjara. Kuta is the corner shrines. Then at the center there is the Shala, which is rectangular, and Panjara in between it comes that is upsided. So this is a combination. For a bigger Vimanas, there will be a repetition of Kuta Shala Panjara. Like that, there will be repetition, and always at the center there will be a Shala flanked by Panjara. Then comes Kuta, then Shala, then Panjara. Like that. So it's a combination of various these kind of categories of miniature shrines which adorns the entire Vimana. And ultimately at the top, the Shikara, it is octagonal in shape. So this is the most characteristic feature of a Dravida temple style. But looking into the plan also, we see there are variations. I mean, always they have been experimenting. It's not always plain square shrine. We have octagonal, we have circular, rectangular, faceted rectangular. So the various kind of plans they have adopted depending upon the requirement, depending upon the type of religious belief systems. And that's why we see variations also depending upon the climatic conditions. For example, in Kerala, we always see, even though they follow most of the Dravidian features, Dravidian style of architecture, they have a sloping roof because of the rainfall conditions there. So they have to devise a different type of superstructure. So depending upon the regional variations, we also see various type of shikaras that have been developing, and that's why among the Nagara style, they have different types of forms known as the Vallabhi style, Latina Nagara style, Famsana style, Bhumija style, and the Shikari type. So these styles, they also evolved in different parts of the Indian subcontinent, and there are excellent examples of each one of the style. And here in the Karnataka area, we have this Ranganatha Temple, which belongs to the Latina Nagara style, which is a simple curvilinear form of Shikara. And in Rajarani Temple of Odisha, we have the Shikari type of temple, and the Brahma temple at Khajuraho. It's a Famsana, which is a square-shaped shrine. Mostly it is found for the mandapas, actually, not for the main sanctum sanctorum. But here, in the case of exceptions, some exceptions, we also find some temples with the Famsana style of superstructure. And this is the Vallabi style of architecture, a style of Nagara temple. An excellent example is the Telika Mandir, which starts from around 8th century CE. It is basically a rectangular on plan with a wagon vaulted or a barrel vaulted roof. And Gondeshwara temple in Sinnar, Nashik, it is one of the best examples of the Bhumija style of temple. So what are these actually? I mean, if you look at the depiction, it is merely the kind of decoration, the merely kind of architectural features one we find on the Shikara portion of a North Indian temple. So the Latina Nagara style, it is the most simplest form of the Nagara style. We find these in existence from 5th century CE onwards, and it's a single curved line which outlines the Shikara. The Shikari style, it has multi-sphered Shikara. It consists of various Shikaras added on the outer face, and it resembles a kind of a group of mountain rising together, and they are found mostly from the 10th century CE onwards. The Bhumija style, again, it was an endeavor for attaining more and more height. They were adding more and more stories or talas. They were adding pilasters of miniature shrines, and topped these pilasters, they are topped by miniature shrines, resembling a addition of a miniature shrine on the wall of the Shikara. And these multiple shrines, when they are combined together, they form one floor. So that's how they arranged various miniature shrines, one above the another, and it is known as one bhumi or one story. And it is again prominent from the 10th century CE onwards, particularly in the region of Gujarat and Rajasthan. Vallabi style, again, I have told you, it's a rectangular on plan with a wagon vaulted roof, basically for goddesses they created. And Famsana style, it was basically for the mandapas, but in a few exceptions, they also were used for the construction of the temples themselves. So we'll find again complex forms evolving within these styles. I mean, the time is very less to deal with each and every style of temple, but here I have taken the example of Shikari. Shikari style, Adam Hardy has done an excellent work on how the use of geometry and adding of more features. I mean, it can be a very simple temple style with only this projection and this projection, but here they are adding additional components here, adding more rectangles and creating a complex format. And in more complex, again, they were adding more projections here, and they're creating a group of shikaras or the shrines which rise along with the main central shikara. So this is how they have created a very complex pattern, but very beautiful and very symmetrical in terms of alignments. And that is one of the hallmark of the peak period of the Indian temple architecture. So we see excellent examples of each style from different parts of India. Here, the Kandariya Mahadeva temple, and more or less we see the 11th century CE, which is the culmination of the temple architecture in the context of the height of the shikara, above the main garbhagriha, the shikara rise to the maximum. So beyond this period, again, we don't see this much tall shikaras, and the height dwindles, and we don't see this much of taller structures beyond 11th century CE onwards. So we see one of the beautiful depiction of this Shikari type of architecture in Kandariya Mahadeva temple, and particularly in the case of Khajuraho temples, there is a additional feature of giving balconies. This is they are the balconies on three important directions. In the case of the Garbhagriha, the Sanctum Sanctorum, it has these balcony projections on three directions. And the case of the front mandapas, this is the Maha Mandapa, we have only two balconies, one on the south and another on the north. So this sort of a symmetry, perfect symmetry, and also alignments and also arranging the top of the various components of the temples in a kind of a perfectly rising manner, reaching a culmination. These have been achieved during the 11th century in the case of the Chandelas in central India. Similarly, if you look into the Odishan style of architecture, they are plain and simple. They belong to the Latina Nagara style, but again they have a Famsana type of mandapa here, which is known as a Jagmohana in the case of Odishan style, and they have a Natamandra in front of that and a Bogamandra in there. So again, the different components are known as differently in different parts of India, and they have also followed their individual pattern of regional variations. But here also we see some of the exceptions, like in the case of Durga temple, which is actually a Shaiva temple at Aihole, which is of 7th century. We see an upside shrine with a circumambulation within that. A pillared passage is there, and the central there is a Nagara style, Latina Nagara style shikara we are seeing here. There are other exceptions. I mean, there are various exceptions we always see in different parts of the Indian subcontinent. In the case of Gujarat, we see the Sun Temple Modera, which is completely different. It follows a different style of architecture. Again, it's a variety of the Sikari architecture, but here what we are seeing is that the Shikara is missing, and in front there is only one mandapa, that is a Maha Mandapa in front of that. And in front of the Mahamandapa, there's a huge ornamental tank. So this is a typical feature of Gujarat region, where we find an elaborate tank which is present alongside a temple also. And in the case of Rani Ki Vav, which is again a temple in the form of a step well, it is such an elaborate construction. It contains various aspects of Vaishnavite deities, various forms of Vishnu, and various depictions of Apsaras. Nearly 108 Apsaras have been depicted, and it culminates in the well here. This is the well shaft here, rising to nearly 7 stories, and depiction of Sheshasai Vishnu at different levels. So depending upon the level of water filling in the well shaft, each and every story, it has the depiction of Sheshasai Vishnu. So this is another very important aspect when compared to the other regional context. So coming to the Dravida style, it is mostly due to the efforts of the Pallavas. We see the emergence of a new type of temple architecture. We have seen yesterday briefly how in the rocket architecture they had transforming from a simple style from the evidences at Mahendravadi and Mandakapattu to Mahabalipuram. They have included various features, including the combination of the Kutasala and the Panjara, and they were repeating this Kutasala and Panjara, and we can see the culmination in the case of the Chola temples here, which is 13-storied of Kutasala and Panjara with various combinations. So along with this, they are also constructing the Gopuram. This is the entrance gateway to any temple complex, and that defines the main entrance to the temple. So this Gopuram, they were plain and simple. Again, in the case of the Pallavas, we have a rudimentary Gopuram at the shore temple Mahabalipuram, and also a single-storied Gopuram at Kailasanatha temple at Kanchipuram. But slowly the Cholas, they are taking over. They are constructing multiple storied here. In the case of Tanjavur big temple, we see 2 Gopuras corresponding to 2 Prakaras. One Prakara means it is one enclosure of the temple, and slowly what they are achieving is that instead of the vertical feature of the Garbhagraha or the Vimana, they are trying to increase the height of the Gopuras. So in the later context, during the period of the Vijayanagara and the Nayak period, the height of the Shikara or the Vimana of the Sanctum Sanctorum, it reduces, and the height of the Gopuram, it increases to even up to 13-story level. That is the kind of the maximum permissible levels of a Vimana or a Gopuram. So this is the sort of examples we find, and we find the earliest examples from again Mahabalipuram. They have been experimenting on various temple formats. We can see the shore temple here, which is a 5-storied. And also they're creating a shrine closely resembling a hut, which is dedicated to Durga here. 2-story to 3-story temples, and an upside-down temple also they have created. So various temple formats they have been creating in a freestanding format, and ultimately they are shifting into the structural forms which the Cholas they follow. The Cholas they follow, and we have excellent examples of early Chola temples belonging to the later part of 8th century, 9th century. Like here, this the Vijayala Cholishwaram at Narthamalai, then Movar Koil at Kodumbalur, then Subramania Temple of Kannanur. These are all some of the earliest examples of the continuation of the style of architecture which the Pallavas followed. And because of the context between the Pallavas and the Chalukyas and also the contemporary rulers, we see the transformation, we see the exchange of ideas, and also the artisans, they were carried to the new territory, and they have started construction of Dravida Shikaras even in the Karnataka region, also in the Chalukyan territory. Here in the Pattadakal region, we see a combination of a Nagara style and also a Dravida style of Shikara. So this is an excellent example. Again, Pattadakal, it is the coronation area of the Chalukya dynasty. So they were constructing many different temples depending upon the requirements and depending upon the donations given by the royal figures, and they were also following different style of architectures also. And of course, the culmination of the Vimana we find in the case of the big temple Tanjavur, and the temple immediately constructed after the big temple. This is the Gagaikonda Cholapuram Temple. It is a slightly diminished form of the big temple. So we see within the Chola period itself, we are seeing a diminution of the height of the Vimana. This is 11th century. This is again 11th century, but again the height is reduced. But in the case of 12th century, the Dharaswaram temple, you can see the height is still reduced. So they are not constructing any more taller and taller Vimanas, and they are reducing their heights to a considerable level. And we see variations of this Dravida style in the case of Hoysala dynasty, who followed a stellar pattern. So they have converted the square and turned the square into at least 24 points, creating a star with 24 points, so that they can project each form up to the top. You can see the plan on the ground. It projects up to the wall and also on the Vimana, and it reaches up to the top. So this is a typical format developed by the Hoysalas, and the most famous examples are this one, the Chennakeshwar temple at Somanathpur, and also the Dodda Basappa temple at Dambal. So these are some of the important examples. So I was briefly telling about the increase in height of the Gopuras. So slowly the height of the shrine, it is insignificant. You can see this is the case of a Tiruvannamalai temple. It has multiple prakara wall. Initially the temple had only one prakara, so they went on adding, because there was nothing to kind of give more to the temple, because it has already achieved its sanctity, it has already achieved its height. So the later period additions, they were only horizontal expansion. So once they reached the vertical culmination of the vertical expansion, now they were into the horizontal expansion during the Vijayanagara and the Nayak period, and they were adding additional prakaras, and they were adding the gopuras on the cardinal direction. So each prakara, it has a gopura on the cardinal directions, and ultimately they reach the height, the culmination of the height in the gopura. Here it is 11-storied gopura in the case of the Tiruvannamalai temple, and the maximum permissible height is 13-storied, what we see at the Srirangam. Srirangam temple is the Ranganatha temple is the largest temple complex in India, which has 7 prakaras. You can see from the Google Earth image how the central shrine here, which is the earliest temple, and they were adding prakaras one after another, and they were housing the important people, priest community also within these prakaras. And the prakaras, they are defined by these kind of rising gopuras and at regular intervals, and which creates an imposing feature, and also indicates the presence of a temple from a long distance also. So this is the peak of kind of architecture we can see during the period of Vijayanagara and the Nayak period. And we also have regional manifestation and variations, like in the form of the structural temples, The circular temple. This is an excellent example of a circular temple from Jabalpur. It's a Chaunshat Yogini temple. We have at least 3 Chaunshat Yogini temples well preserved here in Jabalpur, in Khajuraho, and Hirapur in Odisha. Only these 2 temples, Hirapur and Jabalpur, they have the images also. All the yoginis, they are represented here. It is the female manifestation of energies, and also an excellent example of the Tantrism form of religious faith. So you can see the variations here, and also the regional variation in the case of Kerala, where a conical shape of roof, it covers the Dravida style of architecture. Here is a Gopuram also. We don't have the tall Gopuram here. It is with this kind of cascading effect, slanting roofs. But some exceptions are also there in the case of Kerala temples also, like in the Padmanabha Swami temple, it follows the typical Dravida style of Gopura. So if we move to the hilly regions, in the case of Kashmir particularly, again they have a completely different style of architecture. Even though the Latinanagara style of Shikara it went there, we see the styles. I mean, the facade is defined by a huge piedmont sort of thing, and a multiple arched feature here. You can see it is well preserved here. It is completely different, maybe catering to the snowfall region. There they have to face the heavy snowfall here. That's why they have put the slanting roofs here. So in the case of Uttarakhand temples, they also follow the same sort of shikara, but they put a conical wooden element on the top. So most of you might have seen the Kedarnath temple, where the shikara is topped by a conical wooden element, which helps in preserving the walls of the temple. So we see also examples of brick temples, like in this case of Bishnupur, where we have the terracotta elements have been used to completely embellish the temple walls with various kind of decorations and depictions, and also scenes, which also give evidence of the contemporary lifestyle, even evidence of some of the important features like this river navigation or the mode of construction of the ships, and also this kind of domical roofs with a wagon vaulted feature. It clearly gives much protection because of the heavy rainfall region. So coming to the modes of construction, how they could have actually constructed these kind of temples. I will present only one example here. It's a wonderful evidence which is preserved near the unfinished temple of Bhojpur near Bhopal. It is nearly 60 kilometers from Bhopal, where an unfinished temple is there, but it is still under worship, accompanied by a 100-meter ramp. You can see a ramp here. 100-meter ramp, had it been complete, it would have corresponded to this portion where it was left incomplete. You can see the ramp here, which is extending to nearly 100 meters. So they were transporting the heavier elements to this ramp and reaching to the top. So this is the kind of mode of construction, moving the heavier architectural elements through a ramp to the top of the temple. And nearby the temple, we have complete plans, complete elevations depicted on the rock surface, and also evidences of removal of huge stone elements here with chisel marks, complete chisel marks. So ASI is trying to protect them, putting some barricades, but again it is not sufficient. But complete documentation has been carried out, what kind of elevations there have been depicted. And just before the temple also, we see various unfinished shivalingas which have been scooped out from the bedrock, and which are lying here and there. So this is the kind of evidence which clearly indicates us the various modes of construction methodologies what the ancients might have been followed. So I will quickly run through some of the slides of India's influence outside India, because Indian influence in the Southeast Asia, it reached much earlier. We have evidence of Indian influence starting from 1st century, 2nd century CE onwards, and particularly the temple group at Misan in Vietnam. We have evidence of temple building activities, particularly for the Saivite faith, from 4th century to 14th century CE onwards. We have complete examples of temples here, temple complexes here at Misan. There are at least 7 temple groups with Sanskrit inscriptions in the local script. but they were all derived from the Brahmi script of the Indian subcontinent. So they have a very long continuation. We have Sanskrit inscription. The rulers, they're all Sanskrit names. They followed the Saivite religious faith, and there are large temple groups also. We see a variation in the temple building style also. If we see here, these are two examples from again Vietnam, in the southern part of Vietnam, which belongs to the 12th century. You can see the pyramidal feature of the South Indian Dravida Shikara style preserved here, but with their regional additions and alterations. And that's so they have added these kind of features at the end of the Kuta Shikaras. And also they have elongated the Gavaksha motif, the Chaitya Gavaksha motif, into a more pointed format. But here we see the motifs of Lord Shiva. You can see the dancing Shiva here. Nataraja is depicted here, and also Sanskrit inscriptions. This is the earliest Sanskrit inscription in Vietnam, dating back to 3rd century CE. And also Shiva is worshipped as a Mukhalinga. Mukhalinga is a form of worship of Shiva, which originated in India, or we have the earliest evidence from 2nd century BCE onwards. And after 2nd or 3rd century CE, this form of worship is discarded. But here, if we look into this evidence of Vietnam, it is a clear indication that at least during that early period, this form of worship entered Vietnam, and they are still following the same sort of worship, even though they have added the local feature with a bearded format they have added. And again, in front of a Mukhalinga in a temple known as Po Rome, they have added a multi-armed Shiva with a turban and a bearded form. So we have several examples from Vietnam which clearly indicate the influences, and of course one of the most famous and important evidences is from the Angkor Wat in Cambodia, where we have the largest temple complex in the world, consisting of multiple prakaras and a series of network of canals and irrigation networks, and the rising of the shikaras as though it is reaching the top of the heaven itself. So it's a kind of a symbolic representation of the culmination of temple architecture, one can say, but of course with regional variations and manifestations. Here the famous Samudra Mantana scene depicted on one of the walls of Cambodia. And nearby Angkor Wat is another temple complex known as the Thap Rom, or it is Thap Rom means the tree temple because of the huge tree rainforest trees. It has completely engulfed the temple, but it is also holding the temple. And this is another important temple complex which has influences of the Indian temple format, but again with the regional variations and formats. Here ASA is carrying out conservation for the past 15 years, and you can see the complete transformation it has brought into in the case of Cambodia, which the ancient connections which is helping us, because the Cambodian government, when they saw the poor state of preservation of these temples, immediately they thought of only India because of the connections, because of that similar type of architectural styles and construction modes. So you can see the complete transformation, the complete fallen gallery, which has been documented and completely restored by the team of Archaeological Survey of India. So we have evidences, we can countless evidences going on in various parts of Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Malaysia, even in Indonesia, where forms of temple forms might have gone, but there are only a few places where we have excellent examples preserved. So this is another temple known as Prasad Kravan in Cambodia, belonging to the 10th century CE, dedicated to the Vaishnavite faith. You can see Lord Vishnu carried by Garuda. So this is a clear indication of the influences, and this is one more famous place from Cambodia, where the entire bedrock is depicted with thousands and thousands of lingas and the reclining Vishnu. So I end it here. I hope we had a good account of some of the temple forms and shapes, and also the influences outside India. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us on these 2 days.
Thank you.